I stood in the center of the Meadowview Park Pavilion, staring at the half-baked lasagna sitting untouched on the buffet table. The aluminum tray was still warm, but the top layer of cheese hadn't even melted. Around me, the air hung heavy, silent, confused, even a little scared. For the first time in over a decade, I hadn't delivered perfection. I hadn't arrived hours early with neatly labeled E, serving trays and enough food to feed an army. I just handed Beverly the cold lasagna, looked her dead in the eyes, and said, "This one's raw, just like how I've felt for the last 10 years. Then I walked away. No explanation, no warm smile, no apron, no extra dessert hidden in the car, just in case. And as I walked through that stunned silence, the same silence that had once ignored me entirely, I knew one thing. I'd finally become visible by choosing not to serve. My name is Diane Whitaker. I've lived in Brookfield Springs for 16 years, long enough to see 4 different HOA presidents come and go, and long enough to know that I'd never be invited to truly belong. Our neighborhood sits just outside of Atlanta, nestled between old-growth trees and modern amenities, the kind of place where everyone has perfectly trimmed hedges and opinions they're just dying to share. It's beautiful here in a catalog sort of way, planned, pristine, and completely void of surprises. I moved here with dreams of community potlucks and book clubs, of neighbors who borrowed cups of sugar and returned them with freshly baked cookies. What I found instead was an invisible social hierarchy more rigid than any corporate ladder I'd ever climbed. At first, I didn't notice. When we unpacked our boxes, neighbors stopped by with wine bottles and welcome baskets. Beverly Stanton, the unofficial queen of Brookfield Springs, even invited me to join the community garden committee. Her blonde hair was always styled just so, her tennis skirts pristine, her smile practiced to perfection. "We just love new energy," she said, handing me a community newsletter. "Especially someone with your domestic talents." I should have noticed the way she looked at my homemade curtains, the slight raise of her eyebrow when she spotted my discount furniture. But I was too busy feeling grateful for the invitation. The first neighborhood event I attended was the annual Spring Fling. I spent hours in my kitchen making lemon bars with fresh squeezed juice and zest I'd carefully grated by hand. "Oh, sweetie," Beverly said when I arrived, her voice dripping with honey-coated condescension. "We didn't assign you anything, but sure, go ahead and place it over there." She pointed to a back table, already overflowing with store-bought cookies and plastic-wrapped fruit platters. My glass dish with the hand-embroidered napkin looked painfully out of place, too earnest among all that casual convenience. Still, I smiled and thanked her for the opportunity to contribute. Then I circled the party, introducing myself, complimenting homes and gardens, asking questions about schools and favorite local spots. The responses were cordial but brief, conversations shifting whenever I approached a group. The end of the night, I found myself alone by the dessert table, watching as my lemon bars remained untouched while Beverly's store-bought chocolate chip cookies disappeared. I was already becoming invisible. That's when Karen Delaney approached me, her voice low as if sharing a secret. "Your lemon bars look amazing," she said, taking one. I'd never have the patience. She bit into it, and her eyes widened. "This is incredible. You made these from scratch?" I nodded, warmth spreading through my chest at the genuine compliment. "My oven's broken," she sighed. "I'm supposed to bring 3 pies to the 4th of July barbecue, but now I'll have to buy them, and Beverly will definitely notice." I heard myself saying the words before I could stop them. "I could bake them for you." Karen's face lit up. "Would you? That would be amazing. I'd owe you big time." That was the beginning. 3 pies became 5 sides for Labor Day, then appetizers for Halloween. By Christmas, I was cooking entire holiday spreads, arriving hours early to set up, staying late to clean. I became the invisible engine behind every gathering. 4th of July barbecues, Halloween potlucks, New Year's brunches. Cooked, cleaned, decorated, coordinated, but was never in a single photo. Not even once. The spotlight belonged to Beverly and her tight circle of social royalty, women who wore matching cardigans and talked louder when they were lying. And I was useful, not lovable, not honored, just convenient. They called me Diane the Dish Queen, like it was a compliment. But there was never a thank you, never a you did so much. Just another event, another duty, another disposable favor. "Diane is just so reliable," Beverly would say at planning meetings. "She doesn't mind doing the heavy lifting." Then she'd laugh, as if my willingness to help was somehow funny, or worse, pathetic. Maybe it was. Years passed this way. I kept showing up with my homemade dishes and hopeful heart, watching as other women formed friendships over book clubs I wasn't invited to, or went on shopping trips that were never mentioned until after the fact. "We would have invited you," they'd say, "but we know how busy you are with all your cooking." As if my kitchen was both my kingdom and my prison. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was valued for my contributions, if not for myself, that being needed was almost the same as being wanted. But then came Susan Fields' birthday celebration, 7 years into my Brookfield Springs residency. I'd spent 3 days preparing a feast, her favorite chicken cordon bleu, roasted vegetables, garlic mashed potatoes, and a 3-tier chocolate cake with raspberry filling. I arrived early to set everything up, transforming the community center with fairy lights and fresh flowers. I arranged the dishes, lit the candles, and stepped back to admire my work. "This is beautiful," said a voice behind me. It was Maggie Chen, a kindergarten teacher who had moved to the neighborhood the previous year. Unlike the others, Maggie always spoke to me directly, with genuine warmth. "Thank you," I said, surprised by the compliment. "No, thank you," she insisted. "I've been to a lot of these events, and I've noticed how much you do. It doesn't seem fair." I shrugged, uncomfortable with being seen so clearly. "I enjoy cooking. That's not the point," Maggie said gently. "Do they ever cook for you?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable and revealing. Before I could respond, the door burst open, and in walked Beverly with Susan and the rest of their circle, laughing about something I wasn't part of. They swept past us without acknowledgement, examining the decorations and food as if they had materialized by magic. "Oh, this looks perfect," Susan exclaimed, clapping her hands together. "Beverly, you've outdone yourself!" Beverly beamed, accepting the praise without correction. "Only the best for you, sweetie." I stood frozen, my existence erased with a single sentence. Maggie's eyes met mine, filled with a mixture of disbelief and sympathy. Later that night, as I scrubbed dishes alone in the kitchen while laughter and music floated in from the main room, I wondered what I was really doing here. What was I hoping to gain? Acceptance? Friendship? A sense of belonging that never seemed to arrive? The next day, Beverly posted dozens of photos on Facebook. "What an amazing birthday celebration for our dear Susan. Couldn't have done it without my girls." I scrolled through all 47 pictures. Not a single one showed me or acknowledged my contribution. But there was one where I appeared accidentally in the background, carrying a stack of dirty plates to the kitchen. That's when I realized I wasn't invisible because they couldn't see me. I was invisible because they chose not to. The realization should have changed everything, but habits are hard to break, especially when they're tied to the desperate hope of finally being accepted. So I continued my role as the neighborhood's unpaid caterer, personal chef, and cleanup crew. I kept telling myself that someday they would see me. Really see me. Spring turned to summer and summer to fall. I gained 15 pounds from tasting too many sauces, lost sleep planning menus, and spent money I couldn't really afford on ingredients for dishes that would earn compliments for others. My kitchen became my workshop, my prison, and my silent scream all at once. "Diane, these deviled eggs are divine," Maggie said at the back-to-school mixer, the only person who consistently acknowledged my efforts. "You should start a catering business." I laughed, but the sound was hollow. "Who would hire me when I give it away for free?" Maggie frowned. "Why do you? Give it away, I mean." The question caught me off guard. Why did I? The answer was both simple and humiliating. Because I thought it would make them like me. Because I thought if I fed them well enough, often enough, they would finally invite me to sit at their table. "I don't know," I lied. But Maggie saw through it. She placed a hand on my arm, her touch gentle, but her gaze unflinching. "Yes, you do." Later that month, I received a group text about the upcoming Harvest Festival. Beverly's message read, "Diane, can you do your usual magic again? Lasagna, salad, 3 sides, and maybe a sweet treat if you're feeling inspired. No, please. No, thank you. Just expectation." I stared at the message for a long time, my finger hovering over the keyboard. For 10 years, I had responded immediately with enthusiasm, already planning menus and shopping lists in my head. For 10 years, I had poured my heart into feeding people who saw me as a service, not a soul. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at my ceiling, thinking about all the hours I'd spent cooking, all the money I'd spent on ingredients, All the holidays I'd missed with my own family because I was too busy catering for others. And for what? To be the background character in someone else's story? The next morning, a new message arrived from Beverly. Diane, did you see my text about Harvest Fest? We're counting on you. I felt a familiar tug. The need to please, to be useful, to be needed if not wanted. But beneath it, something else was growing. Anger. Not a hot, explosive anger, but something colder and more deliberate. A quiet rebellion. I picked up my phone and typed, "I'll bring the lasagna." Beverly responded instantly. "Perfect. And the other dishes?" "Just the lasagna," I wrote back. 3 dots appeared as Beverly typed, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, "Oh, okay, thanks." I could almost hear the forced cheerfulness, the confusion, the slight panic. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't fulfilling her every expectation. It felt terrifying. It felt freeing. That Saturday, I went grocery shopping. I bought the ingredients for a perfect lasagna: fresh pasta sheets, Italian sausage, premium, cheeses, homemade sauce. I laid everything out on my counter, the ritual as familiar as breathing. But this time, I didn't turn on the oven. I assembled the lasagna with careful precision: layers of uncooked pasta, raw meat, cold sauce, and unmelted cheese. I wrapped it in foil, placed it carefully in a thermal bag, and drove it straight to the Meadowview Pavilion. Beverly was at the entrance, clipboard in hand, directing volunteers with her usual military precision. When she saw me, her face lit up with rehearsed delight. "Diane, my lifesaver, you brought the lasagna?" I nodded, handing her the thermal bag. It was heavier than usual, dense with its uncooked contents. Beverly peeked inside, her perfect eyebrows drawing together in confusion. "It looks different. It's raw," I said, my voice steady despite the thundering of my heart. Just like the way I've felt every single time I showed up for this community and got nothing back. Her face froze. A pageant smile stuck to shocked eyes. What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean, Beverly." Around us, people were setting up decorations, arranging hay bales and stringing fairy lights. No one noticed our exchange. No one ever noticed me. "Is this some kind of joke?" Beverly hissed, lowering her voice. "People are going to be hungry. What am I supposed to do with this?" I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. The carefully maintained blonde hair with roots that needed touching up. The expensive clothes that couldn't quite hide the strain of keeping up appearances. The desperation behind the social power plays. In that moment, I felt something unexpected. Pity. "You could cook it yourself," I suggested mildly. "Or order pizza. Or maybe, just maybe, you could admit that you've been using me for years and actually apologize." Beverly's mouth opened and closed, no sound emerging. I had never spoken to her like this, had never spoken to anyone in Brookfield Springs with such honesty. "I don't understand why you're being so dramatic," she finally managed. "We've always appreciated your help." "Have you?" I asked, suddenly tired of the pretense. "When was the last time you invited me to sit down at the table I filled with food? When was the last time you included me in one of your coffee mornings or girls' nights? When was the last time you even bothered to learn anything about me? Beyond what I could do for you?" Beverly's face hardened. "If you felt left out, you should have said something. It's not our fault if you chose to be the help." The word hit me like a physical blow. The help. Not a neighbor, not a friend, not even a person. Just the help. I turned without another word and walked away. Past the hay bales and fairy lights. Past the shocked silence and murmured whispers. I didn't look back. As I reached my car, I heard someone calling my name. It was Maggie, running to catch up with me. "Diane, wait! What happened? Are you okay?" I unlocked my car door before facing her. "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. I just delivered my last dish to this neighborhood." Maggie's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I gave them a raw lasagna," I said. And despite everything, I found myself laughing. A real laugh, full and free. A decade of service, and I finally served them the truth. That night, my phone stayed silent. No angry texts, no pleading calls, just a void as deep as the one I'd felt all these years. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my back porch, watching fireflies dance in the twilight. For the first time in years, I had no meals to plan, no desserts to bake, no one to please but myself. It was terrifying. It was liberating. I slept better that night than I had in years. a dreamless, heavy sleep that left me feeling strangely light when I woke. Sunday morning stretched before me, empty of obligations. I made myself a single cup of coffee and a proper breakfast, eggs Benedict with hollandaise sauce I'd never had time to make. Just for myself. As I savored each bite, my phone pinged. I steeled myself, expecting Beverly's righteous indignation. Instead, it was a text from Tasha Dean, a quiet woman who lived 3 houses down and had never said much at community gatherings. Diane, I heard what happened yesterday. I've been thinking about it all night. Can I come by later? I'd like to talk. I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Tasha had always been polite but distant, orbiting the edges of Beverly's social circle without fully belonging to it. What could she possibly want to discuss? Curiosity won out over caution. Sure. 2 p.m.? Perfect, she replied. I'll bring coffee. At precisely 2 o'clock, my doorbell rang. Tasha stood on my porch holding a cardboard tray with 2 cups and a small paper bag. Lattes and blueberry scones, she said, her smile tentative. I wasn't sure what you liked. I invited her in, suddenly conscious of my home through a visitor's eyes. When was the last time anyone from the neighborhood had been inside? The thought was sobering. We settled in my living room, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. For a moment, neither of us spoke. So, I finally said, you heard about the lasagna. Tasha nodded, cradling her coffee cup. Everyone heard. Beverly tried to salvage the situation by claiming you'd had a family emergency and dropped off the wrong dish. She paused, but Maggie told a few people what really happened. I winced. Great. So now I'm the crazy lasagna lady. Actually, Tasha said slowly, you're the woman who finally stood up to Beverly Stanton, and that makes you something of a hero to some of us. I nearly choked on my coffee. A hero? For bringing raw food to a community event? That doesn't seem very heroic. It wasn't about the lasagna, Tasha said, leaning forward. It was about what it represented. You've been carrying this neighborhood on your back for years, Diane. Cooking, cleaning, organizing, doing all the work while Beverly and her friends took all the credit. She set her cup down. And we let it happen. I let it happen. Her honesty took me by surprise. Why are you telling me this now? Tasha's eyes dropped to her hands. Because I was too cowardly to say anything before. Because it was easier to go along with the status quo. She looked up, her expression pained. And because yesterday, when Beverly stood there holding that raw lasagna with this look of complete betrayal on her face, I realized how absurd the whole thing was. How we've all been complicit in treating you like the help, I supplied, Beverly's words still stinging. Yes, Tasha admitted, and I'm ashamed of that. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her confession hanging between us. I don't know what to say, I finally admitted. You don't have to say anything, Tasha replied. I just wanted you to know that some of us see you, Diane. Really see you. And we're sorry it took a raw lasagna for us to find our voices. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. This is from a few of us. It's not everyone, not yet, but it's a start. I opened the envelope. To find a handwritten card signed by 7 neighbors, including Tasha, Maggie, and a few others I'd barely spoken to over the years. The message was simple. We see you now. We're sorry it took so long. My throat tightened. I don't understand. We'd like to make it up to you, Tasha explained. Starting with dinner, at my house, this Friday, and you're not allowed to bring anything except yourself. The invitation was so unexpected, so contrary to everything I'd experienced in Brookfield Springs, that I found myself speechless. You don't have to decide right now, Tasha added quickly. Just think about it. After she left, I sat with the card in my hands, reading and rereading the signatures. Ruth Paxton, who always smiled at me but never initiated conversation. Tom and Lisa. Nguyen, who moved in last year and whom I knew only from nodding hellos. Ben Franklin, no relation to the founding father, as he often joked, a retired professor who walked his golden retriever past my house every morning. People I'd lived alongside for years but never really known. People who, apparently, had noticed me after all. That evening, as I was watering my front garden, a silver Lexus pulled into my driveway. Beverly stepped out, immaculate as always in white capris and a navy blouse, her smile firmly in place despite the tension around her eyes. Diane, she called, approaching with the confident stride of someone used to getting her way. Got a minute? I continued watering my hydrangeas. Depends on what you need. Beverly's smile faltered slightly. Well, I thought we... Should clear the air after yesterday's misunderstanding. Misunderstanding, I repeated, turning off the hose. Is that what we're calling it? Beverly glanced around, as if checking for witnesses to our conversation. Look, I know you were upset, and clearly there's been some miscommunication about expectations. There was no miscommunication, Beverly, I interrupted. You expected me to continue being your unpaid caterer, and I decided I was done with that role. Her carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. That's not fair. You volunteered. Did I? Or did you create a situation where I felt I had no choice if I wanted to be included at all? Beverly sighed dramatically. I think you're being overly sensitive. We've always appreciated your contributions. Appreciation isn't the same as respect, I said, surprised by my own calm. And neither one looks like taking credit for other people's work. A flush crept up Beverly's neck. I've never taken credit. So proud of our amazing team, I quoted from memory. What a perfect day. Couldn't have done it without my girls. That was your Facebook post after the Memorial Day mixer. The one where I made 7 dishes, set up all the decorations, and stayed until midnight cleaning while you took selfies with wine glasses. The post where you tagged everyone except me. Beverly's mouth opened and closed, her rehearsed script clearly failing her. I was in one photo, I continued, carrying trash bags. I didn't realize. Yes, you did, I said quietly. You just didn't care. We stood there in my front yard, the evening air heavy with uncomfortable truth. Finally, Beverly straightened her shoulders, social armor back in place. Well, I came to extend an olive branch, she said stiffly. The neighborhood board was wondering if you'd consider returning to help with the Christmas potluck. We'll give you full credit this time. I stared at her, incredulous. After everything, she still saw me. Only as a function, not a person. I'm not the help, I said, turning back toward my house. I'm the heart you all ignored. Beverly called after me, her voice tinged with desperation. So, you're just going to abandon the community? After all these years? I paused at my front door. I'm not abandoning anyone, Beverly. I'm just finally serving myself first. As I closed the door behind me, my phone pinged with a new message. It was from Lana Prescott, the new neighbor who'd moved in from Asheville last month. She'd signed Tasha's card with a note. I watched the way you left yesterday. That was the most honest thing I've seen in this neighborhood since I got here. Her text was simple. If you're free tomorrow, I'd love to have coffee. Just 2 humans talking. No potlucks, no committees, no pretense. I smiled as I typed my reply. I'd like that. That night, I deleted the neighborhood planning committee's group chat from my phone and ordered takeout for dinner, something I hadn't allowed myself in years. As I sat on my couch eating pad thai straight from the container, I realized something profound. The emptiness I'd felt all these years wasn't from not belonging. It was from trying to belong somewhere that didn't deserve me. Coffee with Lana turned into lunch, which stretched into an afternoon of conversation so genuine it felt almost foreign. Unlike most Brookfield Springs residents, Lana asked questions and actually listened to the answers. She didn't fill silences with nervous chatter or steer conversations toward appearances. So you've been the neighborhood's secret chef all this time, she mused as we shared dessert at a little cafe downtown. That explains the looks I got when I mentioned making my own dishes for the Harvest Festival. I winced. They probably expected you to ask me to make them. Beverly did suggest that, Lana admitted, her eyes crinkling with amusement. She said, and I quote, "Why stress yourself when Diane loves doing these things?" And what did you say? I said I'd rather contribute my own mediocre dishes than outsource my community participation. She shrugged. She looked at me like I'd grown a second head. I laughed, the sound surprising me with its freedom. You've committed a cardinal sin in Beverly's world, thinking for yourself. Guilty as charged. Lana raised her coffee cup in a mock toast. To thinking for ourselves. I clinked my cup against hers. To mediocre dishes made with dignity. By the end of the afternoon, I'd learned that Lana was a graphic designer who worked remotely, divorced 3 years ago, and moved to Brookfield Springs for a fresh start. She loved spicy food, hated reality TV, and had a weakness for true crime podcasts. I can't believe we've lived in the same, neighborhood for a month, and this is the first real conversation we've had, she said as we walked back to our cars. Welcome to Brookfield Springs, I replied, where neighbors are close in proximity but distant in reality. It doesn't have to be that way, Lana said thoughtfully. What if we started something different? Different how? I don't know exactly. Something authentic. No committees, no assigned roles, just people connecting as people. She glanced at me. Would you be interested in something like that? The old Diane would have immediately volunteered to host, to cook, to organize, to serve, but I wasn't that person anymore. I'd be interested in participating, I said carefully, as an equal. Lana's smile was warm. I wouldn't have it any other way. Friday. Arrived with an unexpected flutter of nerves. I stood in front of my closet, realizing that most of my social outings over the past decade had been as the help, not as a guest. What did one wear to a dinner where they weren't expected to cook or clean? I finally settled on a simple blue dress I'd bought years ago but rarely worn, applied light makeup, and even put on jewelry. Small pearl earrings my mother had given me for my 30th birthday. As I drove the 3 blocks to Tasha's house, I passed Beverly's sprawling colonial. The lights were on, and I could see figures moving inside, probably planning the next neighborhood event, reshuffling responsibilities now that their reliable workhorse had broken free from the harness. Tasha's home was smaller, a cozy craftsman with a wide front, porch and hanging ferns. As I walked up the steps, the front door opened, and Maggie appeared with a welcoming smile. "You came," she said, as if she'd half expected me to change my mind. "I came," I confirmed, handing her the bottle of wine I'd brought despite Tasha's instructions to bring nothing. Some habits die hard. Inside, the house hummed with conversation and laughter. Tasha's dining room. Table was set for 8, with mismatched plates and an eclectic array of glasses. Nothing like the coordinated perfection of Beverly's entertainments. "Diane," Tasha emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. "I'm so glad you're here. Come meet everyone properly." Some faces I recognized from Tasha's card. Ruth, the Nguyens, Ben. Others were new to me. Marcos from 2 streets over, who taught music at the high school, and his husband David, who worked from home as a software developer. "We're having a potluck of sorts," Tasha explained as she led me through the house. "But with a twist. Everyone brought a dish that means something to them personally. A family recipe, a cultural tradition, something with a story. The dining table was laden with dishes that looked nothing like the Instagram-perfect spreads at Beverly's events. There was a slightly lopsided casserole, a dish of what looked like homemade kimchi, a tray of empanadas, and a chocolate cake with uneven frosting. "What did you bring?" I asked Tasha. She pointed to the casserole. "My grandmother's green bean casserole. It's not fancy, but it tastes like home to me." For a moment, I felt a pang of insecurity. I hadn't brought a dish. I hadn't contributed. I wasn't serving. Then Maggie approached with a glass of wine. "Don't even think about sneaking into the kitchen to help," she said, reading my mind. "Tonight, you're our guest of honor." "Guest of honor?" I echoed, bewildered. "Absolutely," Tasha confirmed. "This dinner wouldn't be happening if you hadn't shown us how wrong things were in this neighborhood. You woke us up, Diane." I felt my cheeks warm. By delivering raw food? Not exactly my finest moment. "By being honest," Ruth interjected, joining our circle. "Some of us have been wanting to break away from Beverly's kingdom for years, but we didn't have the courage." "Or the catalyst," added Ben, raising his glass. "To Diane, who served us all a hearty portion of truth." Everyone raised their glasses, and I found myself blinking back unexpected tears. Not tears of sadness or resentment, but of recognition, of being seen. Dinner was a revelation. We ate and talked and laughed, really laughed, not the polite titters of Beverly's gatherings. Each dish came with a story. Lisa's mother's kimchi recipe that she'd been afraid to bring to neighborhood events because it was too ethnic. Marcos's grandmother's empanadas that reminded him of childhood summers in Puerto Rico. Ben's chocolate cake, the first thing he learned to bake after his wife passed away. "What about you, Diane?" Lana asked as we lingered over dessert. "What dish means something to you?" The table quieted, everyone looking at me with genuine interest. For a moment, I was speechless. No one had ever asked about my relationship with food beyond what I could provide for others. "My father's clam chowder," I finally said, the memory surfacing like a long-forgotten treasure. "He made it every Friday night, rain or shine." Said the secret was patience, letting the flavors build slowly, respecting each ingredient. I hadn't made that chowder in years, too busy creating elaborate dishes meant to impress rather than comfort. "Will you make it for us sometime?" Tasha asked. "Not because we expect it, but because we'd love to share that piece of you." I looked around the table at these neighbors, these people, who were offering something Beverly's circle never had. Reciprocity. The chance to give and receive in equal measure. I'd like that, I said. Maybe for our next gathering? Our next, gathering, Lana repeated, smiling. I like the sound of that. As the evening wound down, I helped clear the table, not because I was expected to, but because it felt natural to participate in the gentle rhythm of community. This wasn't service, it was sharing. Walking home under a canopy of stars, I felt lighter than I had in years. The raw lasagna had been a breaking point, but this was the beginning of something new, something real. I was halfway down my driveway when headlights illuminated the pavement behind me. I turned to see a sleek black Mercedes pull up, and my stomach clenched when Susan Fields stepped out. "Diane," she called, her voice tight with forced pleasantry. "Got a minute?" Susan Fields stood in my driveway, her manicured perfection stark in the harsh glow of my porch light. Second in command to Beverly's neighborhood reign, Susan had never spoken to me outside of requests for food or cleanup help. "I saw your car coming home," she said, gesturing vaguely down the street. "I've been meaning to talk to you." I crossed my arms. "It's late, Susan." "I know, I'm sorry." She shifted uncomfortably, lacking her usual confident demeanor. "It's just, things are falling apart, and I need to understand what happened." "What happened," I repeated slowly, "is that I stopped being your personal chef." Susan winced. "That's not fair, isn't it?" I shook my head. "Did you need something specific, or did you just come to make me feel guilty?" "The Christmas charity gala," she blurted out. "It's in 3 weeks, and nothing's going right. Beverly's lost half the committee. Tasha won't return calls, and the caterer wants double what we budgeted." I had to suppress a laugh. Of course. She wasn't here out of concern or remorse. She needed something. "What does this have to do with me?" Susan took a deep breath. "We need you back, Diane. The gala benefits foster children. It's for a good cause." The manipulation was so transparent it was almost impressive. Use the children. Appeal to my sense of charity. Make me the villain if I refuse. "I've already donated to the foster care fund directly," I said calmly. "And I'm sure Beverly can handle the food. She's taken credit for it often enough." Susan's facade cracked. "You know she can't cook. None of us can. Not like you." "Then hire someone who can," I suggested. "Or learn." "There's no time for that." Frustration edged into her voice. "Why are you being so difficult about this? It's not like you." "That's the point, Susan. You never knew what I was like. You never asked." She stared at me, genuinely confused. "What does that have to do with the gala?" And there it was, the fundamental disconnect. In Susan's world, I existed solely as a function, not as a person with feelings, desires, or dignity. "Everything," I said quietly. "It has everything to do with why I won't be cooking for your gala or any other neighborhood event." Susan's expression hardened. "I thought you were better than this, Diane. I thought you cared about our community." "I do care. That's why I'm having dinner at Tasha's next Friday, and why I'm joining Lana's book club, and why I'm finally connecting with neighbors as equals rather than as their servant." "Servant?" Susan recoiled. "No one ever called you that." "You didn't have to. It was in every unacknowledged dish, every cleanup I did alone, every Facebook post that erased my contributions." Susan's mouth opened and closed, no words emerging. Finally, she straightened her shoulders. "Fine. If that's how you want to be, we'll manage without you." "I'm sure you will," I agreed. "And Susan, next time you want something from someone, try saying please and thank you, and maybe learn their last name." I turned and walked into my house, closing the door on her stunned expression. Inside, I leaned against the wall, heart pounding. Standing up to Beverly had been a breaking point, but this, calmly setting boundaries with Susan, felt like growth, like healing. My phone pinged with a text from Lana. "How was dinner? Still on for breakfast tomorrow?" I smiled as I replied, "Dinner was wonderful. Breakfast sounds perfect." The next morning, over coffee and homemade muffins at Lana's kitchen table, I recounted my encounter with Susan. "The audacity," Lana shook her head, "to show up at night demanding you cook for them after how they've treated you." "The thing is," I said, breaking a blueberry muffin in half, "a month ago, I would have said yes. I would have convinced myself it was for the children, not for Beverly or Susan. And now?" I considered the question. "Now I understand that my worth isn't measured in casserole dishes and volunteer hours, that I deserve reciprocity in relationships." Lana nodded. "That's a Powerful realization. It is, I agreed. But I'm still figuring out who I am when I'm not serving others. What did you love doing before you became the neighborhood chef? Lana asked. What lit you up? The question caught me off guard. What had I loved? Before the cooking and the cleaning and the desperate need to belong. Photography, I said, surprising myself with the answer. I used to. Take my camera everywhere. Landscapes, portraits, street scenes, capturing moments that might otherwise be forgotten. Do you still have your camera? I nodded. Somewhere in a closet. I haven't used it in years. Why not? I stared into my coffee, searching for the truth. No time, I guess. Between work and all the neighborhood events. But that wasn't entirely honest, and Lana deserved better. We both did. Actually, I continued, I think I stopped because no one seemed interested. I tried sharing my photos when I first moved here, but Beverly and her crowd just gave that tight smile people use when they're not really looking. Lana reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'd love to see your photographs, Diane. The real ones, not the ones you think would impress. People. Something warm unfurled in my chest. The feeling of being truly seen. Over the next week, a quiet revolution took place in Brookfield Springs. The neighborhood split into unofficial factions. Beverly's traditionalists, who continued with their perfectly coordinated but increasingly strained gatherings, and our new group, a loose collection of people who simply enjoyed each other's company, without hierarchy or pretense. We called ourselves the No Committee Committee, a joke that became our unofficial name. We met for coffee, impromptu dinners, and weekend walks. We took turns hosting, but there were no expectations beyond bringing yourself and perhaps a dish to share if you felt like it. I dusted off my camera, feeling the familiar weight in my hands like greeting an old friend. I began carrying it again, capturing moments that mattered. Tasha's laugh as she told a story on her front porch, Ben's golden retriever chasing autumn leaves, the morning light filtering through trees along our walking path. These are extraordinary, Maggie said one evening as we scrolled through my recent photos on my laptop. You have a real gift, Diane. She does, doesn't she? Lana agreed. You know, the community center has that empty wall in the main hall. Wouldn't Diane's photographs be perfect there? The suggestion sent a nervous flutter through me. Oh, I don't know about that. I think it's brilliant, Tasha chimed in. Local art from a local artist. Much better than those generic prints Beverly ordered. Before I knew it, a plan was in motion. Marcos, with his connections, at the high school, offered to help with printing and framing. Ruth, who served on the community center board, arranged for the installation. The No Committee mobilized with an efficiency that Beverly's regimented approach had never achieved, all powered by genuine enthusiasm rather than obligation. 2 weeks later, 12 of my photographs hung on the community center's main wall, landscapes of our neighborhood through the seasons, portraits of community members caught in unguarded moments of joy, close-ups of small wonders easily overlooked, morning dew on a spider's web, the pattern of bark on our oldest oak tree, a child's chalk drawing partially washed away by rain. We should have an opening, Lana suggested. A proper art reception for our neighborhood. Photographer. The idea both thrilled and terrified me. To be celebrated not for what I could do for others, but for my own creative expression, it seemed almost too much to hope for. The reception was scheduled for a Thursday evening in early December, the same night as Beverly's Christmas charity gala planning meeting. We didn't plan it that way intentionally, but the coincidence felt significant, a clear demarcation of the old ways and the new. I spent the day of the reception in a state of nervous anticipation, alternating between excitement and the irrational fear that no one would come. What if this was just another version of hoping to belong, setting myself up for disappointment? Lana arrived early to help set up, sensing my anxiety. Stop catastrophizing, she said, gently, arranging cheese and crackers on a platter. People will come because they want to, not because they're obligated. That's what I'm afraid of, I admitted. What if no one wants to? She squeezed my shoulder. Then it will be you and me appreciating your beautiful work, drinking wine, and eating all this food ourselves. And that would still be a lovely evening. Her words calmed me. This wasn't about validation from others anymore. It was about honoring a part of myself I'd neglected for too long. At 6 o'clock, the doors opened. Tasha and Maggie arrived first, followed by the Nguyens, Ben, Ruth, and a dozen others. Some from our growing circle, some I barely knew but who had seen the flyers Marcos had designed and distributed. By 6:30, the room was comfortably full. People circulated, wine glasses in hand, stopping before each photograph with genuine interest. I heard conversations sparked by the images, memories of past winters, appreciation for details they'd never noticed, questions about technique and perspective. "This is remarkable," said a voice behind me. I turned to find Mr. Peterson, the stern head of the community board who rarely attended social functions. "You've captured something essential about our neighborhood that I've never seen expressed before." "Thank you," I said, surprised by the compliment. "The board would be interested in discussing a permanent installation," he continued. "Perhaps a rotating exhibit of your work. With compensation, of course." I blinked. "Compensation? Artists should be paid for their work, Ms. Whitaker." He handed me his card. "Call my office when you have a moment." As he moved on to the next photograph, I stood frozen, his card in my hand. Compensation, recognition, respect. "Diane!" Lana appeared at my side, her face glowing. "People are asking if your work is for sale. You might need to start thinking about pricing." The evening continued, a warm, flowing celebration so different from the rigid, performance-oriented events of Beverly's regime. People came and went as their schedules allowed, brought unexpected guests, contributed impromptu additions to the refreshment table. I was in the middle of explaining my approach to landscape photography when the community center doors opened and Susan Fields walked in. The conversation around me faltered as heads turned. Susan stood in the entrance, taking in the scene, the photographs, the gathered neighbors, the atmosphere of genuine enjoyment. Her gaze finally landed on me, and for a long moment, we simply looked at each other across the room. Then, slowly, she walked toward me. Susan approached with the careful dignity of someone crossing uncertain terrain. Gone was her usual confident strut, replaced by something more tentative. "Your photographs are beautiful," she said when she reached me, her voice low enough that only I could hear. "I had no idea you were so talented." "There's a lot you don't know about me," I replied, not unkindly. She nodded, accepting the gentle rebuke. I deserved that. She glanced around at the gathering. "This is lovely. Different from our usual events, but lovely." I waited, sensing there was more she wanted to say. "The gala planning meeting was canceled," she finally continued. "Only 3 people showed up." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, surprised to find I meant it. Whatever my issues with Beverly's social circle, the charity gala did benefit children in need. Susan shrugged, a gesture so uncharacteristically casual that it caught me off guard. "Maybe it's time for something new anyway. 10 years of the same event, the same people in charge, the same everything." We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of a decade of neighborhood dynamics hanging between us. "Why did you really come tonight, Susan?" I finally asked. She met my gaze directly. "To apologize, and to see what was drawing everyone away." A faint smile touched her lips. "Now, I understand." Before I could respond, Beverly herself appeared in the doorway, her expression a complex mixture of surprise, displeasure, and, most unexpectedly, curiosity. She surveyed the room with the calculating eye of a general assessing enemy territory, then marched purposefully toward us. "Susan," she said sharply, "I've been calling you for an hour." Susan straightened her spine, but didn't turn away from me. I needed to see something for myself. Beverly's gaze flicked to my photographs, then back to me. "So, this is where everyone's been disappearing to. A little art show." "Diane's work is being considered for a permanent installation," Susan said, a note of pride in her voice that surprised me. "Mr. Peterson was just discussing it with her." Beverly's eyebrows shot up. "George Peterson? Head of the community board?" I nodded, uncomfortable with the sudden attention. "He never comes to our events," Beverly said, more to herself than to us. She looked at my photographs again, her gaze lingering on a portrait of old Mr. Winters sitting on his porch, his weathered face caught in a moment of peaceful contemplation. "These are unexpected." Coming from Beverly, it was almost a compliment. "Thank you for coming," I said, unsure what else to offer. Beverly seemed equally uncertain, her usual social script failing her in this unfamiliar territory. "The gala planning meeting was a disaster," she finally said. "We need to discuss contingency plans." "Actually," Susan interjected, "I was thinking we might take a different approach this year." Beverly turned to her, eyebrows raised. "Different how?" "More inclusive, less hierarchical." Susan glanced at me. "We've been doing things the same way for so long. And maybe that's why we're losing momentum. I watched Beverly's face as she processed this gentle rebellion from her most loyal lieutenant. Her expression cycled through disbelief, anger, and finally, surprisingly, resignation. "You want to invite them," she said, gesturing to the room at large. "I want to invite everyone," Susan clarified, "and actually listen to their ideas." Beverly was silent for a long moment. "And who would be in charge?" she finally asked, the question revealing her fundamental concern. "Maybe no one needs to be in charge," I suggested quietly. "Maybe we could collaborate instead." Beverly looked at me as if I'd suggested, "We all move to Mars." "That's not how organizations work, Diane. Someone has to make decisions." "Decisions can be made collectively," Susan pointed out. "We could vote or reach consensus or—" "This is absurd," Beverly interrupted. "Next you'll suggest we hold hands and sing Kumbaya." I might have been offended by her dismissal a month ago, but now I only felt a strange compassion. Beverly's entire identity was wrapped up in being in control, in knowing she was at the top of our little neighborhood hierarchy. The idea of a flat structure threatened not just her position, but her sense of self. "No one's trying to take anything away from you, Beverly," I said gently. "The charity gala is important work, and you've led it successfully for years." She eyed me suspiciously. But, maybe it could be even more successful with fresh perspectives. More hands making lighter work. A true community effort. Beverly's gaze drifted around the room, taking in the warm conversations, the genuine connections, the easy laughter. Something flickered across her face. Longing, perhaps. Or recognition. "I'll think about it," she said finally. It wasn't agreement, but from Beverly Stanton, it was revolutionary. After they left, Lana appeared at my side. "What was that about?" I think," I said slowly, "it might have been the beginning of a thaw." The reception continued for another hour, winding down naturally as people drifted home to relieve babysitters or prepare for early workdays. No one rushed to clean up or organize. We all simply pitched in, restoring the community center to order with the easy rhythm of shared purpose. As I drove home, my car filled with empty platters and leftover wine, I felt a profound sense of contentment. Not because my photographs had been admired, though that validation was certainly sweet, but because I'd finally found my place in Brookfield Springs. Not as the invisible helper, not as the background character, but as a full and equal participant in community life. The following Sunday, an email appeared in my inbox from the neighborhood listserv. The sender was Beverly Stanton. The subject line: "New approach, Christmas charity gala planning." The message began: "Dear neighbors, after careful consideration, the gala committee has decided to take a new approach to this year's event. We invite all interested residents to join us for an open planning meeting this Thursday at 7 p.m. in the community center. We welcome fresh ideas and perspectives as we work together to make this our most successful fundraiser yet. In the spirit of true collaboration, this will be a potluck meeting. Please bring a dish to share if you're able. But no pressure. Your presence is what matters most. Looking forward to seeing new and familiar faces. Beverly Stanton Chair, Charity Gala Committee." I read the email twice, noting the careful phrasing. Beverly was still identifying herself as chair, still maintaining some control, but the invitation was unmistakably different from her usual directives. My phone rang almost immediately. It was Lana. "Did you see Beverly's email?" she asked without preamble. "I'm reading it right now," I replied. "It's unexpected. Are you going to go?" I considered the question. The old Diane would have approached this as an opportunity to serve, to prove my worth through food and labor. The new Diane had boundaries, self-respect, and a clear-eyed understanding of reciprocity. "Yes," I decided, "but I'm bringing store-bought cookies and actual opinions." Lana laughed. "Perfect. Want to walk over together?" Thursday evening found us approaching the community center, where cars already filled the parking lot. Inside, the main room had been arranged with chairs in a circle, rather than Beverly's usual classroom-style rows. A table along one wall held a hodgepodge of dishes, some elaborate, some clearly purchased, all offered without judgment. Beverly stood near the entrance, a clipboard in hand, but her usual commanding presence somewhat muted. She nodded as we entered. "Diane, Lana, thank you for coming." I placed my package of chocolate chip cookies on the food table. "Thanks for organizing this, Beverly." She watched me set down the store-bought cookies, and I braced myself for a subtle dig or disapproving look. Instead, she simply said, There's coffee and tea at the end of the table. The meeting itself was unlike any neighborhood gathering I'd ever attended. Beverly began by acknowledging that attendance at traditional events had been declining, and that perhaps it was time for fresh approaches. She outlined the gala's purpose and history, then opened the floor for ideas. At first, people were hesitant, years of Beverly's top-down leadership having trained them to keep suggestions to themselves. But gradually, voices emerged. Marcos proposed involving the high school music department for entertainment. Ruth suggested a silent auction featuring services from neighborhood residents, tax preparation from the accountants, legal consultations from the lawyers, cooking lessons from the home chefs. What about an art component? Tasha suggested, glancing at me. Diane's photography exhibition was so successful. Maybe we could feature local artists? Beverly's pen hovered over her notepad. What did you have in mind? Perhaps a gallery section, Tasha continued, warming to her idea. We could sell prints with proceeds going to the charity. Or commission pieces specifically for the event, Lana added. I know several artists who would donate their time. For a good cause. I felt a tap on my shoulder and turned to find Susan leaning forward from the row behind me. Would you consider showcasing your work, Diane? She asked, loud enough for others to hear. Your photographs of the neighborhood would be perfect. All eyes turned to me, and I felt a momentary panic. It was one thing to display my art in a small reception for friends, quite another to feature it at the gala attended by hundreds from across town. I'd have to think about it, I stammered. You should do it, came a voice from across the circle. Beverly. She met my gaze with something approaching respect. Your work captures this community in a way nothing else has. The room fell silent, everyone aware of the significance of Beverly's endorsement. The woman who had erased me from countless Facebook posts was now publicly acknowledging my talent. Thank you, I said, meaning it. I'd be honored to contribute. The meeting continued, ideas flowing freely, responsibilities distributed based on interest and ability rather than social standing. By the end, we had a plan unlike any previous gala, more inclusive, more creative, more truly representative of our diverse neighborhood. As people began to disperse, Beverly approached me, her expression uncharacteristically hesitant. Diane, she began, I wonder if you might have time for coffee next week. There are some aspects of the photography exhibition I'd like to discuss. I studied her face, searching for the hidden agenda, the subtle manipulation. But all I saw was a woman trying, however imperfectly, to adapt to a changing social landscape. I'd like that, I said simply. As I helped clear away cups and plates, not because I was expected to, but because it was the right thing to do, I caught sight of my reflection in the community center windows. I looked different somehow. Straighter spine, calmer eyes, the posture of someone who had finally found her place, not by forcing herself into spaces where she wasn't valued, not by serving until she disappeared, but by standing firmly in her truth and waiting for the right people to notice. Coffee with Beverly was as awkward as expected. We sat across from each other at Maple Street Cafe, two women with a decade of complicated history between us, neither quite sure how to begin. I ordered us both lattes, Beverly said when I arrived, gesturing to the steaming cup waiting for me. I hope that's all right. I nodded, noting the small peace offering. Thank you. We made stilted small talk about the weather and local news before Beverly finally set her cup down with purpose. I've been doing some thinking, she began, her voice carefully measured, about the neighborhood, about my role in it, about how things have been. I waited, giving her space to continue. When you delivered that raw lasagna, she said, I was furious. I thought you were being deliberately difficult, sabotaging an event out of spite. She traced the rim of her cup with one manicured finger. It didn't occur to me to ask why. Would you have listened if I'd tried to explain before? I asked, genuinely curious. Beverly considered this, then shook her head slightly. Probably not. I was too invested in maintaining the status quo. Her honesty surprised me. What changed? Everything, she said with a short laugh. The planning meeting that no one attended. Your photography exhibition that everyone loved. Susan questioning decisions I've made for years. She looked up at me. But mostly, seeing how people respond to your approach. My approach? You don't try to control everything. You let people contribute in their own ways. You listen. She shrugged, the gesture stiff and unpracticed. It seems to be working better than my method. The admission clearly cost her, and I felt a surprising surge of empathy. Beverly had built her identity around being the neighborhood's leader, the indispensable organizer who kept our community functioning. Recognizing the flaws in that system meant questioning her own worth. "It's not about replacing one leader with another," I said gently. "It's about creating space for everyone to participate as equals." Beverly nodded slowly. "That's what I wanted to discuss regarding the gala. Your photography will be a centerpiece, but I don't want to just appropriate your work. I want to do this right." We spent the next hour outlining plans for the exhibition portion of the gala. Beverly listened to my ideas, offered thoughtful suggestions, and took careful notes. Not once did she try to overrule or dismiss me. It wasn't a perfect interaction. Old habits occasionally surfaced in her tone or assumptions, but the effort was genuine. As we were preparing to leave, Beverly I hesitated, then said, "I owe you an apology, Diane, for years of taking your contributions for granted, for treating you as the help." She stumbled over the last words, remembering our confrontation. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot. I'd like to make it up to you somehow," she continued. "I'm not sure how, but I'd like to try." I considered her offer. The old Diane might have brushed it aside, too eager to please to accept amends. The new Diane recognized the value in acknowledged wrongdoing and attempted reconciliation. "I appreciate that," I said. "Maybe the best way forward is just to build something better together." Beverly nodded, relief evident in her expression. "I'd like that." The weeks leading up to the Christmas charity gala transformed our neighborhood in ways I never could have predicted. The rigid social structure that had defined Brookfield Springs for years gradually softened as planning committees became more inclusive, as voices previously silenced found space to be heard. I selected 20 photographs for the exhibition, working with Marcos and his high school art students to create professional quality prints and elegant framing. Lana designed a catalog featuring my work alongside pieces from other neighborhood artists who had emerged once the invitation was extended. My father's clam chowder made its debut at a pre-gala committee dinner, served in mugs around Tasha's dining room table as we finalized details. The simple dish, made with patience and love just as my father had taught me, earned genuine appreciation. Not for its presentation or sophistication, but for the story it told, the connection it represented. "You should serve this at the gala," Ruth suggested, cradling her empty mug. "The caterer has already planned the menu," I reminded her. "So, we can add one special dish." Tasha looked around the table. A symbolic offering from the neighborhood's heart. The idea caught on, and somehow, through channels I wasn't privy to, arrangements were made. My small contribution would stand alongside the professional catering, not as an obligation, but as a choice. A statement about the value of personal connection. The night of the gala arrived with a light dusting of snow that transformed Brookfield Springs into a perfect holiday postcard. The community center glowed with tasteful decorations, a collaborative effort led by Susan, who had discovered a talent for event design once freed from Beverly's micromanagement. My photography exhibition occupied the center's main hall, 20 images capturing our neighborhood through different seasons and perspectives. Each photograph told a story. Elderly Mr. Winters on his porch watching neighborhood children play, the Nguyen family's garden in full summer, bloom, the intersection of Oak and Maple Streets after a spring rain, light reflecting in puddles like scattered diamonds. I stood at the entrance, greeting guests as they arrived. Unlike previous galas, this one attracted a true cross-section of our community. Longtime residents and newcomers, Beverly's traditional social circle and the growing no-committee, families with young children, and elderly couples. "Your work is extraordinary," said Mr. Peterson, pausing to shake my hand. "The board has approved a permanent installation in the community center lobby, with seasonal rotations. We'd like you to curate it." Before I could respond, Beverly appeared at my side. "Diane's already agreed to lead a neighborhood photography workshop in the spring," she said. "So we'll have a whole new generation of artists to feature alongside her work." I blinked in surprise. I had mentioned the workshop idea in passing during one of our planning meetings, but hadn't expected it to become reality so quickly. Beverly caught my expression and smiled, a genuine smile, not her usual social mask. "I hope that's all right. I took the liberty of adding it to the spring calendar." "It's perfect," I assured her. "Thank you." As the evening progressed, I circulated through the gala, enjoying conversations that ranged beyond the surface pleasantries of previous years. Near the buffet table, I found Susan serving my clam chowder in elegant cups, explaining to guests the story behind the recipe. "This is Diane's father's special chowder," she told an elderly couple I recognized from 3 streets over. "He made it every Friday night as a family tradition. The secret is patience, letting the flavors build slowly, respecting each ingredient." She caught my eye over their heads and winked, letting me know she remembered my story from Tasha's dinner. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. Proof that I had been heard, that my words had mattered to someone. Later, as the charity auction reached its crescendo, I found myself standing beside Lana, watching as bid cards flew up for a weekend at Ruth's lake house. "We did it," she said softly. "We're raising more money than any previous gala, and people are actually enjoying themselves." "We did," I agreed, surveying the room filled with genuine laughter and connection. "It feels different this year. You know why, don't you?" Lana turned to me, her expression serious. "It started with you, with that raw lasagna and your courage to walk away." I shook my head. "It wasn't courage. It was desperation. Sometimes they're the same thing." She squeezed my hand. "You showed us all that there was another way to be a community, that we didn't have to accept the old hierarchies and exclusions." As the auction wound down, Beverly took the stage for the traditional thank you speech. In previous years, this had been her moment of glory, an opportunity to claim credit and reinforce her position at the top of our social order. This time, she surprised us all. "Before we close, I want to acknowledge the real success behind tonight's record-breaking fundraiser," she began. "For years, I've stood here talking about my committee and my vision. I was wrong." A murmur ran through the crowd. "This community doesn't belong to any one person or group," Beverly continued. "It belongs to all of us, and it's at its best when everyone's gifts are recognized and valued." Her gaze found me in the crowd. Some of you may have heard about an incident at our Harvest Festival. Diane Whitaker, who had quietly made every neighborhood event possible for years, finally had enough of being taken for granted. She delivered a raw lasagna and walked away. Nervous laughter rippled through the audience. "It was the wake-up call we needed," Beverly said. "It forced us to look at how we'd been operating, who we'd been excluding, whose contributions we'd been erasing." She gestured to the room at large. "Look around. This is what a true community looks like. Not a hierarchy with some at the top and others serving, but a circle where everyone belongs, where every contribution matters." I felt tears prickling behind my eyes as Beverly concluded. "So tonight, I want to especially thank Diane Whitaker, not just for her beautiful photography or her delicious chowder, but for having the courage to show us a better way forward. Sometimes it takes a raw lasagna to reveal a raw truth." The applause that followed wasn't just polite, it was enthusiastic, punctuated by cheers and a few whistles. Lana squeezed my hand as people turned to look at me, their faces warm with genuine appreciation. After the gala, a small group gathered at Tasha's house, a mix of old friends and new connections, including, surprisingly, Beverly and Susan. We sat in her living room, shoes kicked off, ties loosened, sharing impressions of the evening and planning future gatherings with the easy flow of people who had found their authentic community. "I have a confession," Beverly said during a lull in the conversation. "I tried to make lasagna last week. It was a disaster." Laughter filled the room, tension dissolving in shared amusement. "Maybe we should all learn to cook," Susan suggested. "Not to be perfect, but to share the experience." "A cooking club?" Maggie perked up. "That could be fun." "I could teach a few basics," I offered, surprising myself. "Not as the neighborhood chef, but as someone sharing a skill I enjoy." "And I could teach photography," Marcos added. "David could do basic home repairs. Lana could lead graphic design workshops." "A skills exchange," Beverly mused, warming to the idea. "Using our community center for actual community building." As the conversation flowed around me, I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment. This wasn't the belonging I had desperately sought for so many years. It was something better, something real, connection based on mutual respect and genuine appreciation. I caught Lana watching me, a knowing smile on her face. "Happy?" she mouthed silently. I nodded, a deep contentment settling in my chest. Yes, I was happy. Not because I had finally been accepted into Beverly's inner circle, but because I had found my own circle, one that expanded to include everyone willing to show up as their authentic selves. The raw lasagna had been my breaking point, but it had also been my beginning. By walking away from a community that didn't truly see me, I had created space for a new kind of belonging to emerge, one built on reciprocity, respect, and the revolutionary idea that everyone deserves to be both served and celebrated. Spring arrived in Brookfield Springs with a profusion of dogwood blossoms and new beginnings, the community center calendar filled with workshops and gatherings organized not by a central committee but by neighbors sharing their passions and skills. My photography sessions filled up within hours of being announced. Beverly's garden design class attracted both experienced gardeners and novices. Marcos's teen music program brought new energy to our previously quiet Saturday afternoons. The neighborhood newsletter, once Beverly's personal megaphone, transformed into a collaborative publication featuring diverse voices and perspectives. My photographs appeared regularly, documenting the evolving life of our community. "Have you seen this?" Lana asked one sunny April morning, sliding onto the bench beside me at our favorite coffee shop. She handed me her tablet, open to a community blog from a neighboring town. The headline read, "Brookfield Springs Revolution, How One Raw Lasagna Transformed a Community." I nearly choked on my coffee. "What is this?" "Someone wrote about what happened here," Lana explained, grinning. "Apparently, word has spread about our neighborhood transformation." The writer interviewed several people about the raw lasagna incident and the changes that followed. I scanned the article, mortified and fascinated in equal measure. The writer had pieced together the story with surprising accuracy, from my years as the unacknowledged neighborhood chef to the moment of rebellion and the community reformation that followed. "But I never spoke to a reporter," I protested. "You didn't have to," Lana said. "Your story resonated with people. It's become something of a local legend." The article concluded, "What happened in Brookfield Springs isn't just about neighborhood politics. It's about the courage to demand reciprocity in relationships, to set boundaries after years of giving without receiving, and to believe that communities function best when everyone is valued for who they are, not just what they can provide. Sometimes the most powerful statement is the dish you choose not to serve." By lunchtime, my phone was buzzing with messages from friends and neighbors who had seen the article. Even my sister in Colorado called. "A raw lasagna die?" She laughed. "That's perfectly you, making a statement without saying a word." That evening, as I watered my front garden, Beverly's silver Lexus pulled into my driveway. She emerged holding a casserole dish. "I brought dinner," she announced, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "I made it myself." I raised my eyebrows. "Is it cooked?" She laughed, the sound lighter than I'd ever heard from her. "Thoroughly, though I can't promise it's good." We sat on my porch with plates of her somewhat overcooked but earnestly prepared chicken casserole, watching the neighborhood children play a game of tag across front lawns that once would have been off limits. "Have you seen the article?" Beverly asked, setting down her fork. I nodded. "Strange to see our story written out like that. I thought I'd be mortified," she admitted, "having my worst behavior exposed publicly. But actually, I'm proud." "Proud," she nodded. "Not of how I treated you, I'll always regret that, but of how we've all grown, of what we've built together." Since then, I understood what she meant. The article hadn't portrayed her as a villain, but as someone who had been trapped in old patterns and found the courage to change. It was a redemption story as much as a revolution. "The writer wants to do a follow-up piece," Beverly continued, "about the skills exchange program. She thinks other communities might want to implement something similar. The idea that our neighborhood experiment might inspire others hadn't occurred to me." "That's unexpected." "That's impact," Beverly corrected gently. "Your impact. You changed things here, Diane. Not just for yourself, but for all of us." Later that week, I received an email from the community board. They were establishing an annual neighborhood recognition award for extraordinary contributions to community well-being. They wanted to name it after me. "I can't accept that," I told Lana as we walked through the neighborhood park the next morning. "It feels excessive." "Why?" she challenged. "Your actions literally transformed this community, not by being perfect or self-sacrificing, but by having the courage to say enough and walk away. But naming an award after me, while I'm still, alive? It seems deserved," Lana finished firmly. "Though I understand your discomfort, what if you suggested an alternative name? Something that captures the spirit of what happened without personalizing it." I considered this. "The Reciprocity Award," I suggested. To recognize those who help create balance between giving and receiving in our community. Lana smiled. Perfect. Though, everyone will still know it's really the Diane Whitaker Award. Summer arrived with a new neighborhood tradition. Monthly potluck dinners in the park, where everyone brought a dish that meant something to them personally. No assignments, no expectations, just sharing food and stories under the oak trees. At the June gathering, I brought my father's clam chowder, now a neighborhood favorite. Beverly Ciar contributed her improved chicken casserole. Susan arrived with homemade bread, proudly announcing she'd been taking baking classes. Marcos and David set up a portable sound system for background music. The Nguyen children organized games for the younger kids. As twilight settled over our impromptu feast, I found myself sitting beside Mr. Winters, our neighborhood's eldest resident at 92. You know, he said, his voice creaky with age but his eyes sharp as ever. I've lived in Brookfield Springs for over 40 years, seen neighborhoods come and go, but I've never seen anything quite like what's happened here this past year. Is that good or bad? I asked, smiling. He chuckled. Good. Very good. In my day, neighborhoods were real communities, places where people took care of each. Knew each other's stories, showed up when it mattered. He gestured to the gathering around us. This reminds me of that. People being people together, not just addresses on the same street. From across the park, I caught Lana's eye. She raised her glass in a silent toast, and I lifted mine in return. In that moment, surrounded by neighbors who had become friends, I felt a completion I hadn't known I was seeking. The raw lasagna had been my breaking point, yes, but it had also been my beginning. The moment I stopped disappearing into service and started appearing as myself. In October, exactly 1 year after the incident, Tasha hosted a special dinner at her home, a reunion of the original No Committee, now expanded to include nearly 20 regular members. I propose a toast, she said, raising her glass as we gathered around her dining table. To raw lasagna and real community. To boundaries and belonging, Maggie added. To cooking together instead of cooking for each other, Susan contributed. To Diane, Beverly said simply, meeting my gaze across the table. Who had the courage to walk away so we could all find a better way forward? As glasses clinked, and conversation flowed around me, I thought about the journey of the past year. I had gone from invisible to integral, from server to celebrated, from desperate for approval to comfortable in my own worth. But the most profound change wasn't in how others saw me. It was in how I saw myself. No longer defining my value by what I could provide, but by who I was. No longer measuring belonging by inclusion in someone else's circle, but by the authentic connections I formed through mutual respect and genuine interest. Later that evening, as I helped clear the table, not out of obligation, but simple friendship, Lana joined me in the kitchen. Remember that article? She asked, drying a wine glass I had just washed. The one about the raw lasagna revolution? I laughed. How could I forget? My 15 minutes of fame. The writer contacted me yesterday, Lana continued. She's expanding it into a book about community transformation. She wants to interview all of us. I paused, soapy hands hovering over the sink. A book? About us? About what happened here. About how one person setting a boundary rippled outward to change an entire community. I considered this as I finished, washing the dishes. My small act of rebellion, born not from courage but from exhaustion and hurt, had created space for something new to emerge, not just for me, but for everyone in Brookfield Springs who had felt excluded or undervalued by the old order. What do you think? Lana prompted. Will you talk to her? I dried my hands, considering the question. The old Diane might have demurred, uncomfortable with attention or praise, but the woman I had become recognized the value in sharing our story, not for personal recognition, but for the possibility that it might inspire similar transformations elsewhere. Yes, I decided. I think I will. That night, as I drove home under a canopy of stars, I thought about the strange winding path that had led me here, how a decade of invisibility had culminated in a single moment of truth, how walking away had finally made me visible, how refusing to serve had ultimately created more meaningful service. I pulled into my driveway and noticed something unusual. A small package on my front porch. Inside was a beautiful ceramic serving dish with a simple note, for your next masterpiece, cooked or raw. Your choice is always valid. B. Beverly's gift made me smile, not just for its thoughtfulness, but for the journey it represented. From Diane the Dish Queen to a neighbor whose choices were respected, from invisible engine to valued artist, from the help to the heart. The next morning, I placed the serving dish on my kitchen counter and began gathering ingredients, not for another neighborhood event or obligation, but for the simple joy of creating something beautiful to share with friends who saw me, really saw me, for exactly who I was. As I chopped and measured, I remembered my father's words about his beloved chowder. The secret is patience, letting the flavors build slowly, respecting each ingredient. It had taken a raw lasagna for me to finally respect myself as an essential ingredient in my own life. To recognize that sometimes the most powerful way to show up is to walk away. That boundaries aren't walls, but foundations upon which true connection can be built. I spent a decade giving everything to people who only saw me as a service, not a soul. But the moment I stopped performing and started protecting myself, I found people who didn't just want my cooking, they wanted me. When they only see your hands, stop offering your heart. When they only value what you provide for yourself first. When you're invisible despite your service, become visible through your absence. And when you finally find your true community, those who cherish your presence more than your presence, that's when the real feast begins.